Fuck you, poker. You know, when I get out of bed and I go through my morning routine and I'm feeling good and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to make another Cash Game Mastery installment. I'm going to bring the beloved YouTube people more of my thoughts on a session. So let me just play a quick little session. Let me just play for like 30 minutes here, generate some spots across 2 tables and go through it in the recorded format, which is what I've done. Only poker decided to absolutely destroy me while I sat down to do this. I only played for like half an hour and I got into painful hand after painful hand. I'm being dramatic. I was also just in a very bad mood this morning and I'm now projecting the way this session made me feel at the time onto now where I actually feel a bit better. It's kind of afternoon now. But we're going to go through this hand after hand. This is not a winning session. This is a session where I get brutalized. But nevertheless, I want to show you my thought process. I want to show you how I unpack a losing session. Because when things don't go your way, there's really nothing you could have done about it. A lot of the time, okay, maybe you made your problems worse by making mistakes, but usually when you have a really bad session, that was just destiny for you. That was just in the cards, you know, it was going to happen. So today we're going to go through these hands. It all starts with this ace queen offsuit hand. I'm going to show you how I actually make sense of losing and how we can handle it in the best way possible. We can't turn it into an absolute net positive, but we can definitely turn it into something a bit better than it usually is for us if we have the right approach. So now we've got that rage out of our system, let's do that. We defend ace queen offsuit here, hijack versus big blind. It's worth noting that big blind's range is a bit more polarized here. They're going to have more hands like suited connectors, suited kings, suited aces, things like this that the small blind player would not have at such a high frequency. So we're dealing with a more polar range that allows us to do a bit more flatting. With hands like this, ace queen is actually going to be a higher equity, more dominant hand in the hijack here against big blind than it would be against small blind, where perhaps you can still call, but maybe now you mix 4-bet. You don't mix 4-bet against big blind because call is too good. Against the more polarized range, it's actually bluffing with some bad combos, like I say. So we decide to call, we get flop of queen 6-5. Against this large bet, you really shouldn't be. When I say large, I mean not third pot. I know half pot's not massive. But for 3-bet pot, many people use this sizing as their large bet. My name is Carl, is obviously one of the better known regulars that plays these games, and will probably have a pretty solid high frequency, I would think, but maybe not betting everything strategy for this sizing. We're not meant to raise here. You do not need to raise when 1, you're in position and the pot is already growing steadily. We could say the urgency is low in this spot. 2, your range is much more capped overall than your opponents. You don't really have much of a value region that wants to invest extra money at this point. Like, yes, you can have a hand like ace queen and it may not be terrible to raise this hand and, you know, GII, get it in as they say. But at the same time, there's nothing to gain by doing it. We have a little bit of 5s and 6s, but sometimes we fold these to the 3-bet. And our opponent has aces and kings all the time. And we don't. Our opponent also has a lot of really low equity hands here, like ace 4 of hearts and stuff like that as well, or king jack or something. So villain is going to be way more polar than we are here. They bet big, so we are just going to be playing call only as our defense mechanism. In game, when the 4 of diamonds hit here and my opponent checked without too much thought, I knew I was in a world that was quite advantageous for range. And when that's the case, like when your range, as we'd say in the Carrot Poker School, my cash game course that's available in Carrot Corner, is entitled to more of the pot than your opponents, we call it a favorable world. And what that means is that you can bet fairly freely. You can bet for kind of thin value, you can do a lot of bluffing. You don't have to impose like harsh standards on yourself as to what you bet. Okay, maybe we don't bet like 9s or 10s or something with no diamond here, but most hands are going to be able to bet. We can bet third pot. Villain is still kind of polarized here in GTO. He's still meant to be protected. Check raising with some flushes, check raising with some overpair plus diamond, check calling sometimes as well with uncapped hands, and of course just check folding like the garbage in their range and the ace king of spades and stuff like that. Well, when we don't have the ace of spades is. So we decide to go ahead and check here, and in game the reason I checked is actually kind of a cop-out reason. It's kind of an embarrassing reason. I checked here because if I bet, I didn't know whether my hand was a bet call or a bet fold, and I did not want to cross this juncture against a competent opponent. I think that's actually a good reason to check once here instead of mixing. I was very confident that GTO would mix here, but I chose to check. And we can actually pull this up. We have this in the pile sim here. I was very confident I was allowed to go ahead and bet this turn. Villain bets big on the flop. As you can see, we don't play any raises in a spot like this. Solver content just to pure call. So we did that. The turn came down, the 4 of diamonds. Villain is meant to check frequently. They can build a small bet here, but advantageous spot for us in positions EV here is 287 chips out of 489 for the non-mathematicians amongst you. That's a lot. That's like comfortably more than half the pot. When they check, that goes up further. Highly favorable world or range, if we look at Range Explorer here, is doing very well. We won't look at Range Explorer because it's a pain in the ass actually, but our range is ahead of villains. Okay, fine, I'll pull up Range Explorer. I did say that I would. Let's pull it up for a sec. As we can see, the in-position equity is considerably higher than the out-of-position equity. The EV will also be way higher because EV actually takes position into account and equity doesn't. So because our range, all of our dots are way above villains, it's out of position. Oop. Villain is oop. We are ip. So because ip's range is destroying oop's range, ip gets to do a ton of betting and gets to bet fairly unselectively. Let me show you what that looks like. So it looks like this. Lots of small bets, understanding that our opponent is still kind of polarized. The solver is barely using the big bet button at all here. And as we can see, hands like jacks, no diamond, or just jacks in general is like one of the only hands that's pure checking. Nines I cited as a hand that probably wouldn't bet here, but it actually can, because apparently we only have nines with a diamond now at this juncture, because villain big bet the flop, so I guess that makes some sense. But when it comes to our hand, we very much have an optional betting scenario. We are allowed to go ahead and bet here. We absolutely don't have to go ahead and bet here, and I didn't because I didn't understand well enough what I was doing against check raise, which won't happen a ton. It shouldn't be like tons of check raising on 3 flush turns because the range our opponent's facing is a bit more polarized, but I am supposed to call it off with that hand. I would have felt a little queasy about that. I guess it's just standard. I just didn't know how much the third diamond here would interfere with this. It's also kind of like a tight position, right? Hijack big blind. But we're winning 3.9 big blinds, 39 chips by check calling here, which is pretty significant. So yeah, okay. So what happened next was rather painful. So I did check back the turn, hit 2-pair in the river, life feels good. My opponent went for this kind of standard, I guess, when you think about it. Thin value block bet, about third pot here. As you can see, my initial instinct is just, okay, you know, this is kind of a capped range. There'll be a little bit of like slow play in here sometimes, like I'm not saying I always win, but I was pretty confident I had to go ahead and jam all in, as you see me slide the slider all the way to the right there. And the reason for that is that this range should be mostly capped at around 1-pair. 2-pair that we actually beat that has blockers that don't want to actually go big. So villain has like ace 4, ace 5 here, which are like fairly common hands for them to have pre-flop in this configuration. Then they just want to block bet probably because they're blocking the calling range of a very large bet and don't have like enormous hands. So those hands are in there, ace king is in there, ace jack is probably in there, some other ace x is in there, and then there'll be like a little smattering of hands that beat us, but not too many at all. So when you actually have a shit ton of equity, you are supposed to go ahead and jam. Let's just see what the solver thinks of this play. So we do stick it all in. Let's go back over to the solver, refer to its wisdom. It's infinite wisdom. Block bet is supposed to be villain's main weapon of choice here. Kind of cool that they found that. I guess that's what we should expect. In terms of flushes, there's a little bit of like nut flush in there, as you can see. Actually, these aren't nut flushes at all. These are just the other king x because those ones aren't possible. So the only flushes are like traces of like king jack, king queen suited, jack 9 suited, 10-8 suited. For some reason the jack 10 is like very intent on checking instead. Obviously this is like solver land, it's not particularly useful or important exactly which combos slow play, but the idea is that some are meant to. Kings with a diamond goes for like a thin value bet. All ace x is betting here, including 2-pair and 1-pair. Even as low as like king queen of spades doing a little bit of block there. So it really does show you just how weak this range is meant to be. And against that, you can actually look at our equity view here, and you can see that our hand is meant to be 90% equity. When you have a hand with 90% equity, guys, you ship it. You absolutely ship it. So I was very happy at the time to see the block bet on the river here. I understood that I was doing really well, that I was basically just almost never losing and I was shoving for value. Will I get called often enough here? Let's look at the defense strategy. Will I get called as much as the solver is? Possibly not. Like a lot of this is just flushes. Okay, there's some suited ace x I actually missed there. That's the nut flush that's in here too. But for the most part, yeah, we are getting called off by a lot of 1-pairs here. Ace king is usually calling, that kind of thing. So tons of stuff to target. You guys love targeting, right? You live for targeting. You can target ace x. Or you can just like make a shove because you have 90% equity in game theory says it's great, you know, either one. So anyway, as I say, we did rip it as we're supposed to. And I'm not really making any deviations against this player. Kind of a bit too much respect for players of this ilk to make deviations. And we get snapped by jack 10 of diamonds. He's not even meant to bet that hand, guys. He's meant to check the jack 10 of diamonds. Doesn't he know how to be a solver? Apparently not. Thought my name is Carl was a solver. But anyway, I think he played the hand fine. I guess you can block bet the river. One reason that he may have block bet the river could be that maybe people aren't very good at bluff catching properly in my shoes here. If he uses a bigger bet, it's a very unappealing board for much of my range. If I bet too much queen x on the turn and don't call river often enough with an underpair, you can see how I overfold to a larger sizing. So maybe that was villain's thinking. Maybe he thinks I'm like a spewy player that's just going to take like 8s with a diamond and rip it all the time and something like that. I don't know. But either way, that was a painful way to get stacked in a spot where, you know, against that sizing, you're just hardly ever going to be stacked. It's not going to happen much, right? Let's move to the next spot. 10-9 of diamonds here. Facing an open from a reg who is in the hijack. We decide to peel. We're only peeling this low frequency. We're actually 3-betting this the majority of the time, I think. Villain bets small, and we decide to just call on the paired board. You're going to have some raises here, but they're not really going to be 10-9. If this board was like King 10-3 instead of King King 10, I think you can raise the 10-9 as a sort of hybridy play. You can get called by a lot more weaker hands in that case. Your hand is a bit more live. Your straight outs, your straight backdoors and flush backdoors are better because the board isn't paired. It's a bit more viable as a kind of weird hybridy mix thing. It does exist. Equilibrium, you know, game theory is a weird beast. There's some stuff like that that goes on against EP, against hijack and under the gun especially. In this node though, we just decide to call, which I think is standard. Villain checks back on the turn, ace of spades comes in the river, and we have a very mundane check. We're right in the middle of our range here. And this is a spot that's a little bit tricky for an early position player, because while they're going to be drowning in hands like ace x here, and they should have a little bit of king x here, but they're not going to have much in practice. They have a little bit of queen jack, but not very much in practice. The question is, what are they bluffing on this node? I think the 9 is kind of a per card because they're going to have stuff like 9-8 that's bluffing here. I don't think the 10 is a positive blocker because I don't think they actually have a lot of value bets containing a 10 here. So I'd say my bluff catcher is average at best and probably mixing call and fold in theory. I decided to pure fold here because Villain has to conjure the bet bluff lines here with quite a lot of underpair. Maybe people are finding that, maybe they're not, I'm not so sure. Now that I think about this out of game, I don't even have a reason to want to always make this fold. I decided it was really hard for Villain to bluff here, but it's actually not for like a competent player. And, you know, I'm not making content here for a 50 NL grinder, like who's going to want to fold in this spot all day. I'm making content against a stronger player here. So I think probably the right play here is to roll, call and fold, just to make sure I'm not overfolding. And potentially, what do we raise here? I wouldn't think it's this hand. I don't think this is the right hand to raise. The 10 is not a positive blocker. I think you need to be blocking like the top of their range on this sort of node. So this could be a spot where like you bomb raise some like really weird blocker hand that's like better than this. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the raising range is here. It's an interesting point. I don't think it's this though. I think you want some kind of straight blocker or something, I would imagine. But we opt to fold there. I think in hindsight, I may just mix that spot. I think I get into a little bit of an overfoldy sort of vibe going on if I fold that all the time. So 3-bet aces against My Name is Carl, out for revenge here. They also stacked us on another table that I've not shown yet. So this guy stacked us twice during the session. So fortunately we were able to pick up aces, 3-bet, get it in against queens and hold. So got back one of the stacks before we got obliterated even more. You want to be a little bit sensitive when you're playing against the small blind and not the big blind. So here we opened ace 10 suited, we get a board of 5-4-3. This is a fantastic board for a tight player that calls in the small blind. This player was running really tight HUD stats over a fairly small sample, but it was still indicative that they may well be on the tighter side. So we just elected to check back the flop here rather than, you know, embarking on some ambitious turning our hand into a pseudo bluff immediately. I don't think it's terrible to bet here, and a lot of people do, but I think checking back is probably better. You get a bit of transparency against someone that looks to be quite fit or fold, like quite straightforward. So we elect to check. Villain checks the turn, nothing to be done. I think we have a pretty standard check. I mean, you could err on the side of making some small bet just for denial if you were really sure that, you know, your opponent's not slow playing much here. This is a line that actually is very overbluffed by the big blind. So if I was to face this action against a normal player that wasn't really tight looking, that was in the big blind, I would be snapping ace high on the river. You saw me do that with ace jack high actually in the last installment of Cash Game Mastery. But here I quickly fold. It's a combination of the small blind's range being way less air heavy, the jack coming on the river hitting some of the air they did have, and just the idea that there's just not as many base combos of like queen 10 off in the small blind as there would be in the big blind. So fairly trivial fold, I believe, for all of those reasons. We get into a 3-bet pot here where we 3-bet the jack 7 of hearts pre-flop, big blind against button. This is definitely a hand that I think we're okay mixing into the big blind 3-bet strategy here. I don't see a problem with it at low frequency, and we are making sure we roll all of these so we don't end up just bloating our 3-bet range immensely. Decide to build a checking range on this flop. I think we're a bit more pulled around the king, the queen here. Like we have some ace x2, but our range contains a lot of mediocre hands on this board. We have a lot of hands like kings, queens, jacks. We have a lot of hands like bad ace x offsuit, that sort of thing. So we're not like really polar here. I don't think we're wanting to bet that frequently. And I don't think we have a big range advantage here at all when we're big blind against button specifically. We've split our range in a polar fashion pre-flop. We're just not going to be oozing like value hands and ace x and stuff like that like we would be in the small blind or something, or maybe in position where we have the more linear strategy. I think once you've played this hand as a check, it can only really check call. I don't think at this SPR or any SPR it makes any sense to check raise here. The small bet's kind of weird. I would expect a lot of players to just play a big bet on an ace-high board here, just choosing to bet good ace-x plus in bluffs. The small bet is possibly a symptom of just people thinking they can bet more often than they can here. I don't know. Very easy bluff catch on turn. We have a fantastic bluff catcher with redraw, blockers to boats, and just a ton of improvability. And river is a really fascinating spot here, actually. I'll give you guys a theoretical take on this hand first, and then I'll think about it exploitatively, as I kind of always recommend that you do. So the theoretical take here when you face a jam, and villain is imminently about to shove, is basically that you need to call some hands that aren't ace-x on this node. You do have ace-x, right? We do check call the flop with plenty of ace-x ourselves. I think we have enough quads here that we can happily call quads, and then just a little bit of other stuff to this slight overbet. Need to be defending around sort of 48%. 49% of our range, something like that here in equilibrium. And I think we can pull that off just by calling ace-x, then a little bit of other stuff. What other stuff should we be calling? Well, something that contains a 7 seems okay. I don't think that can block bluffs terribly effectively. The jack of hearts seems kind of... Is it good? Is it bad? It will depend on whether villain actually follows through with missed hearts here. I suspect that people generally don't, but then that sort of begs the question, like, what is villain bluffing? I don't think people follow through with busted flush draws very often in this spot. I think people underbluff the paired ace turn when they don't have a flush draw, and therefore I think the river is just probably very underbluffed by almost all opponents. Not like really good players that are like masters at forging their range, but even against them, it's fine to overfold as long as they're not overbluffing. If villain is playing balanced against you and you overfold your range, there's not really a loss unless you're folding hands that are like very good to call blocker-wise or something. So maybe this is one of the hands that like does okay as a bluff catch because hearts aren't bluffed here, the 7 isn't bluffed here, that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean I want to call it in reality, because in order to be bluffing, villain needs to either be following through with a busted flush draw, bluffing turn without the flush draw, and then just blasting river. And all of these things, they take quite a lot of heart. You need to have quite a lot of balls to just sit here and blast off with like jack 10 of spades. It's possible. I think this is an underbluff node. I think I'm going to run into quads more often than I should. I think I'm just going to run into like ace queen off, ace jack off, ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, ace 9 suited. Okay, there aren't like tons of combos of ace-x here, but I don't think that many bluffs make it here and follow through at the same time. So I don't really expect to win the sort of 34-35% of the time I need to win here. I think I'm just going to be shown quads very frequently. I think it's a very given up node in general. And we do fold a lot of our non-ace stuff on the turn as well. Like a lot of our pairs are going to fold turn. So I'm okay folding this one. I'm actually not bothered if I only call the river with an ace here against pool. I think it's probably just the best way to play. Against most people, there will be some regs that I know to be very good, and against them I'll probably be rolling call with this hand. It does seem like a calling candidate, but yeah, I'm just not really interested in this situation against the wider global pool. I just narrated this entire hand and then realized that I hadn't unpaused the recording. This is the kind of day I'm having, guys. This is the kind of fucking day I'm having, yeah? Grumpy Pete on stream this morning, Grumpy Pete on YouTube. Now we've not pressed play on the video, it's going well. It's going well. Leave me some love in the comments, guys. I'm going to need it after today. Just having one of those days where I can't quite get into a good mood. Don't shame me for it, chat. You know, commenters. It's all good. We all have these days. Let's normalize it. We all have days where we just can't be bothered. We have days where we just can't win a pot. Where an ace comes on the flop every time you have kings, right? We all have these days. You can relate to that. Show me some love in the chat. Gonna need it in the comments today. Perk me up about when this video comes out, although maybe that'll be like a week from now and then I'll be in a good mood, but who knows, I might be having another bad day. So we do appreciate all of the likes, all of the subscriptions, and all of the comments. So we range bet flop. I think that's really normal. The 10 of diamonds comes on the turn here in this 4-bet pot. We are going to get flatted a lot by this position because we're really polarized pre-flop and they are really merged, so this is a very normal thing to happen where we 4-bet, they call, we bet flop and they call. The 10 of diamonds made me wonder whether I'm actually low enough down to start like third pot bluffing here. I think I would only use third pot on this node, and I do think the villain can maybe fold like some ace-x here. In practice, I decided there weren't quite enough better hands folding, and if I did get raised, it would be like a huge disaster. Like a really, really huge disaster, because clearly villain is massively underbluffing here if they raise turn, and they're going to have... I mean, they can pretend they're not. Like, this player can sit there being like, I'm not underbluffing, what are you saying? Oh, how can you accuse me of this? But like, clearly they are. I decided there weren't enough better hands folding immediately. I decided that like, because they can have queens, that this hand has like some degree of showdown, though I think queens is getting very low in both ranges here. So I thought I could bluff queens, not kings. Maybe I can bluff here. I decided exploitatively it wasn't the best, and also I wasn't sure that it was theoretically warranted. So if I'm ever in doubt about a line, like I know checking is good, but I don't know that betting is good, I'm just gonna check, right? I'm just gonna make the line that's never the blunder, and it should be fairly easy to proceed from here. In order to bluff enough, he's gonna have to start blasting like queen jack, king jack, things like this. This is gonna go check check a lot, I think. So we do check, and this time it does transpire that villain, anytime now mate, anytime, bets half pot. So when I see half pot here, I'm immediately like, okay, like what the hell are the bluffs in this spot is really hard to find, right? I mean, there are some. You can peel flop with queens and then you can turn it into a bluff on the turn, all right. I think a lot of people will miss that. Better players will find it. You can start bluffing with queen jack suited, sure. Maybe you can like turn ace 4 into a bluff because like your range is just so strong, I don't know. Or you could have like some really rare 6-5 suited or 7-6 suited that you 3-bet, but that's super rare, super low frequency play pre. You should flat the 4-bet with it if you do have that hand though. So I thought this is probably under bluffed, but at the same time I just have so much going on here. I do beat a bluff that doesn't follow through on river. I have the nut flush draw, I have a gutter, it looks like an easy check call. I thought check raising here as a bluff would be suicidal. I just didn't think there'd be enough bluffs in villain's range to make it good, and therefore not enough fold equity. So I think this range is just very strong. Villain actually rivers the 1, no the 2, one of the 2 outs there. No, the 7 is good too, one of them being harsh. One of the 6 outs that bails them out of this situation. 7 outs, Pete, come on. No, 5 outs. How many outs does villain have? He's 2 6s and 3 7s, that's 5 outs. No wonder I had a losing session. 5 outs. Got there in the end. How painful was that for you guys to watch? Let me know in the comments. So yeah, we lost that one as well. We found a way to lose that one. Let's go over to the other table. It's going to look the same. You're not going to notice any difference, but there's a few hands there I just want to, you know, lament about before we wrap up. Playing a spot against a confirmed weaker player here. So we go ahead and c-bet ace-9-4. I'll always bet this hand. I know in equilibrium I can check it sometimes. I'm just not going to. Like, turn gets led too erratically. Flop fold equity is too high. I don't get raised enough. There's just lots of reasons to pure bet this hand. On the turn, I do have the heart blocker. I block the check raise bluffs that are going to attack me and make me fold. I block the king queen of hearts that's going to call. I unblock the folding range for the most part here, so I don't think the jack of diamonds is a big part of it, and so I think you can mix bet with this hand. Normally I would be 150 this spot when I'm betting, and this hand is a fine bluff. As you can see, I actually decide to save myself a bit of money here. This isn't an elasticity based play, meaning that we don't think that this opponent is likely to be as elastic as they should be. While golf balls are made up of like little elastic band thingies, I still don't think the villain will be elastic enough on this node, and therefore I think that we can probably just garner the decent amount of fold equity we can usually get with B150, even with like B112 or whatever the hell we're using here. So this is a little ploy that I use against weaker players specifically. If this is you, Lee, and you're watching this, next time you will know not to fold here, because I will only ever have a bluff when I use a slight overbet here, because the rest of my overbets are B150s. Look at me exposing my strategy. Look at me not being afraid. Poker players are so like, I can't tell him my strategy, I might get exploited, I mean, this is terrible. They're always like that, but really they just need to get a grip on their life and just get on with it. Just get over it, guys. You're not gonna get, no one knows, no one's even watching. No one cares what you do. No one cares what you think or what you say or anything. So just get on with your life. Stop fucking worrying about these things. 6s. Anything interesting to say here? We can just go for range bet on this board. I think it's totally fine. Villain peels. I would bluff some pocket pair on this card. Not 6s. I would bluff like 3s or 4s or deuces here. I think something below the 5 makes sense. I think 6s has a bit too much showdown value. This is a fantastic turn for a range. It's not bad for villain either though, when they filter by calling flop and kind of move towards a bunch of these combos. So I guess, oh yeah, we're timing down like a baboon here because we have hand going on other table, yes. We have a hand going on the other table. So yeah, they bet river and like, good luck bluffing enough on this node. I mean, you can for that sizing, but the 10 makes it harder, and we have a hand that doesn't look like a great bluff catcher. I just like to fold there. Usually when they filter and then block river on a run out like that, they're going to be under bluffing. Not every spot's under bluffed. You know, you see me say that spots are over bluffed sometimes as well. Ace king here. This was the other time that we got wrecked. Spoiler alert. My name is Carl. Just decided to wreck us multiple times in the session. Just decided to like pick us apart and scavenge on our corpse like a horrible vulture. That's what he did. Or maybe it wasn't him. No, it was him. This player called 4 bets. I think ace king is a really clear jam in these positions. If I'd been under the gun here or something, this gets really murky and it's no longer so nice. This is not massively winning. This is a little bit winning. My name is Carl calls. As soon as you see that call, you know you're going to die. And kings, and we didn't get there. No, sad times. Second stack we lost. That was before we got the stack back with the aces, so we're full of hatred for this player at this point, as you can imagine. Full of the hate. Not anymore though, it's all good now. It's all good now, my guy. Ace king 9, probably going to go for a small bet here, multi-way. Queen comes on the turn, miserable spot, decide to check for transparency reasons. This will be very underbluffed. We don't have to actually like make a small bet here when we can check and find out what's up and then bet river. Really, we can block river if they check back or something. Our hands got really thin. Gonna just cry and call here. We're not going to do great, but we need to be entitled to like something like 20% of the pot to make this peel. So go ahead and make it against quarter pot. Chop chop against the ace. People are going to bet mergy. Reopening there with an ace for a small bet is such an entirely pointless play. Like, because my range is just going to be, it's going to have hands that can check raise for value. That's so thin that you could just wait till river and then do it. I just don't see the point of reopening for a small bet there. Not to say that that means anything. Sometimes my students waste a lot of their time because they sit there during a hand and they're going to be like, oh, okay, villain it goes for this play. This is not a thing. I don't understand this play. This is not a thing. I don't know why he does this. What is his problem? It doesn't matter why he's doing it. Yeah, it's not important like why he thinks this is a play, or I couldn't care less. What matters is that we can actually like use our 10 seconds that we have to act, figuring out what the line kind of is, what is the range that does it. Who cares about why he's doing it or condemning him for taking a sizing you wouldn't make? It's such a huge waste of time in your thought process. So do be careful of that. I don't know what that accent was meant to be. It was like somewhere between like Eastern European and French. I think it was like someone that moved around a lot as a child. Yeah. Ace king now. This was a spot that came up again. Can we get redemption against my name is Carl? Can we do it? Anal rectal decides to peel or squeeze, and my name is Carl comes along for the fun. I don't do a lot of c-betting in this situation, although it's an okay spot for range. The queen is very much more in my range than theirs usually here. I just squeeze a very big Broadway heavy range. The queen's not the best Broadway though, so I wouldn't bet range here. I do decide to bet this time. One reason for this is I don't want to face like random stabs that this player shouldn't really be making if I check, and secondly, I think it's going to be super tough for my name is Carl to play well here, given that it's gone bet and call. It's going to be hard. I actually expect my name is Carl to go ahead and fold most pocket pair at this point. I think that's a play that a lot of people would make when it's already like a protected pot, and just fold equity later seems, or showdown value later seems minimal. So I decide to check turn, and my reasoning for this is just that this turn is kind of a horror show for my range, and I want to be checking really often when I'm in a hostile environment where two people have called me. So my range does want to do a lot of check. This is kind of the hand I should be betting though, and I wonder if I should just be betting here. I think it's just too dangerous in the sense that there are two ranges now that are incredibly strong in this situation. So the combined enemy here, while each range isn't like amazingly strong, they're both kind of uncapped-ish, and I don't know what I think of my fold equity against this player's top pair. People tend to underreact to being multi-way, so it's very possible that if I bet turn here like queen 10 is meant to fold or something, it's very plausible, and I'm not sure that's happening, so maybe I get less folds than I'm meant to. Obviously we can't do much about that. Aces here, we decide to check for 3 streets. It's all very boring. We're mixing bet and check on the flop here, going for some check raise, maybe some check call, but mostly check raise. On the turn again, we're blocking ace-x, we're blocking our opponent's main calling range, or a big part of it. We're unblocking the value bets, not the nut flush ones, but the other ones, and we're unblocking bluffs here, so we decide to go ahead and check. I think this is really standard. Even with ace of diamonds, I think you can be checking here a lot and going for a check raise, or whatever, depending on sizing. And then on the river, yeah, I think we still have a value bettable hand, even though it's 4 straight, but again, I just block ace-x. Ace-x is like the sort of hand that calls here, that bluff catches sometimes, and I unblock like jack high and king high and queen high, and I unblock some value bets that we maybe beat. I'm not sure about that. Maybe bets like king 9 here, I'm not sure, but it seems like we unblock enough bluffs that we can go for a check again here. I also think people bet too many of their showdown value hands on the turn there when checked to twice, so I don't actually think value betting is as lucrative as theory might suggest. And I think that's kind of about it. Yeah, there's not really any other spot in this video that's worth talking about, so I hope you enjoyed as we finish on the screenshot of us folding the 10-4 offsuit blind versus blind. Got wrecked in the session, really annoying session, but life goes on. How do you unpack these? You go through solvers, you sort of check your lines, you make sure you're happy with your play. If you're not happy, you see it as a golden opportunity to learn. You want to be curious, you want to be thirsty, You don't want to be full of self-doubt and self-condemnation. That's not going to take you anywhere. So yeah, and also decompress. Take a minute, take a while, take an hour, a day, however long you need to sort of unwind after that session. Understand that it's normal to feel bad when you just get kicked in the whatevers for an hour. Anyway, let's resume this next time. More cash game mastery to come. I will get some more losing to cruisings made with Mark as well. Those are in the pipeline. We just haven't been able to convene yet to do them, but we will soon. You know what to do. It's carrotcorner.com for all of your poker coaching, learning, and course viewing needs. See you next time, guys. Much love. I'm out of here. Bye bye.